Welcome to the inaugural meeting of the first meeting of the Vermont Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. I'm calling it ENDCAP. We might call it CAP. We might call it DCAP. I'm not sure what we're going to call it at this point, but it is the Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel for the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much. Obviously, this is a very different format than the VSNAP earlier rendition, and that's intentional. I wanted to get the panel's members so that they could talk to each other, and the citizens surrounding us so that you could hear and understand what was going on, but also participate as we go forward. We have a very full agenda tonight, but that is intentional also because there's a lot happening at the nuclear power plant that we want to catch you up on, catch the panelists up on, and then move forward with. So I welcome you all and encourage your active participation as we go forward. I want to acknowledge that the Brattleboro Community Television, BCTV, is here and will be recording this entire event and posting it and making it available to other citizen television, community television throughout the state. So this will be one mechanism by which we communicate with people. We also do have a website that will be dedicated to this, where documents and other items will be posted on an ongoing basis. Our intent, I want to say, did I say that I'm Chris Recchia, Commissioner of the Public Service Department? I don't think I did. My name tag says that. But I am chairing this first meeting by statute. Depending on where things go at the end of the meeting, I may or may not be chairing the next. But the point is that this is a citizen advisory panel that's intended to provide a way of the general citizenry to understand and to respond to what's going on with the decommissioning process associated with Vermont Yankee. We do have some professionals up here, and they'll introduce themselves in a minute, but we also have citizen members that will be attuned to what is the interest of the general public, and what are the questions you guys have, and what do we need to do to get answers to that. The way I have formatted this first meeting is we will have some discussion of the purpose of the ENDCAP, and also have some discussion of what the legislative goals and responsibilities are. And then we will talk about the settlement agreement briefly so that people who haven't seen that understand general context of that. But mostly we'll be focusing on where things are in the stage of decommissioning right now. We'll get presentations from Entergy on that. And we will get public comment. You will be able to comment on each of these items as we move forward through the evening. I'd ask that we, and I expect fully, this being Vermont, I know that we will be respectful of each other and be able to have ongoing dialogue through this process and make it a productive, constructive thing. So at the moment, I guess I'd like to start with introductions, and I am going to start with one, which is in the last 6 months, we hired a nuclear engineer, Tony Lashinsky. Tony, could you stand for a moment, please? And Tony is a nuclear engineer that we hired, and he's been really on site at Vermont Yankee since his inception here several months ago, and will be following through the decommissioning. He's also helping on all of this logistics of running the ENDCAP, and also helping on a variety of issues related to moving into decommissioning. So I just wanted to welcome Tony and acknowledge him that he's on my staff and working. So I would like to start with other intros, so I think we'll start over here. Representative Mark, would you mind introducing yourself and maybe telling a little bit about who you are and why you're here?
I'm Paul Mark. I'm the state representative for what's called the 2nd Berkshire District, which is all the communities that touch Vermont, Greenfield, all that area. And I was appointed by Governor Patrick to serve as Massachusetts' representative to this event.
Yep, I am, my name is Derek Jordan. I'm a citizen representative. I was appointed by Shap Smith, and because I've worked with anti-nuclear groups, particularly the Citizens Awareness Network, and I'm here basically to bring up concerns that people have in the community to help them, you know, voice those concerns and also to get back to them to better understand what we are doing here.
I'm State Representative David Dean, representing Westminster, Putney, Dummerston. I am also the river steward for the Connecticut River Watershed Council. And in both roles, I have been involved quite a lot with Entergy Vermont Yankee. I too was appointed by Speaker Smith and hope to bring my perspective and my experience dealing with issues around Vermont Yankee to this panel.
Good evening, I'm Steve Skibniowski. I'm a lifelong resident of Vernon and representing the town of Vernon and the Vernon Board of Selectmen. Just some background, I've been an employee at Vermont Yankee since 1972 and currently am involved in the environmental effluence program for radioactive effluents.
Good evening, my name is David Andrews. I'm a Vermont Yankee employee. I represent the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers and the men and women who work at the plant and are unionized. My day job, I'm a radiation protection technician at the plant. I've been employed at Vermont Yankee since 1994. And unlike Steve, I'm a recent person to Vernon. I've only lived there for 21 years.
I'm Bill Irwin. I work for the Vermont Department of Health. I represent the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services, and I worked at the Department of Health in the radiological control program to monitor work at Vermont Yankee and its public health consequences.
Thanks, Bill. David Mears. I am the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, which is one of the departments of the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources.
I'm Chris Camp, and I'm the Executive Director of the Wyndham Regional Commission. We coordinate planning among the 27 towns in southeastern Vermont. Also happy to say that we're, because the impacts of the closure of the plant are going to transcend state boundaries, we're also collaborating and coordinating with our sister regional commissions in New Hampshire and Massachusetts.
I'm Representative Mike Hebert, and I represent Guilford and Vernon. I am on this panel because I am one of the legislative representatives. I serve on the Natural Resources Committee, and the Senate and House Natural Resources Committee each has one member to serve on this, and the Speaker appointed me as a representative for the Natural Resources Committee, and I also reside in Vernon.
Hi, I'm Lucy LaRiche, Deputy Secretary at the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development. I am here filling in for Pat Moulton, Secretary of the agency, who will be the official member.
I am Kate O'Connor from the town of Brattleboro. I was appointed by Governor Shumlin to serve as a citizen member, but I'm also a member of the Brattleboro Select Board.
I'm Jim Tonkovich. I'm one of the community representatives appointed by Senator Campbell. Part of my experience in my day job with Vermont 211 is working with emergency management, and I'm a part of the JIC, or the Joint Information Center, down here at the plant.
My name is Jim Matto. I'm also a citizen member appointed by Senator Campbell. I live in Westminster, and for 20 plus years I was involved with Vermont Yankee issues at the Wyndham Regional Commission, both Public Service Board issues and emergency management planning issues.
My name is Mike Toomey. I work for Entergy Nuclear, Vermont Yankee. I'm the VP of External Affairs. My office is in White Plains, New York. I was one of the two members to the panel named by Entergy Corporation, the owner of the facility.
Good evening. I'm Chris Wamser. I'm the site vice president at Vermont Yankee Station. I've been the vice president there for approximately the last 3 years, and I am the other Entergy rep on this panel.
Good evening. I'm State Senator Molly Kelly, and I represent the city of Keene and 14 surrounding towns, many of them, as you well know, border the Connecticut River and are neighbors to Vermont. And I have been appointed to this commission by our governor, Maggie Hassan.
Thank you all very much. And again, I'm Chris Recchia. I'm Commissioner of the Public Service Department. And we are charged with representing the public interest in all electric generation and other energy issues and telecommunications, for that matter, for the state of Vermont. So I'm delighted to have you all here. You're an exceptional panel, and we're looking forward to doing this. Martin Langevin is also a member appointed as a citizen by the speaker. He is not able to be here tonight, but he'll be here at subsequent meetings. I just wanted to make sure you all knew he was a member as well. Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Mark McDonald as well, who is appointed on the Senate side to be the Senate representative, and he was on the previous VSNAP panel as well, and he is clearly not here at the moment. So hopefully we will have, and I'm sure we will, full panels in the future. We'll talk a little bit about the schedule later in the agenda. But in the meantime, just for everybody's benefit, including the panel members, who many of whom were just named like a few days ago, I've asked Tony Lashinsky to briefly discuss the DCAP mission and where we are on that and how we came to be and what we're supposed to do. Thanks, Tony.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you all for being here. If I can have the next slide, we'll jump right into it. The Citizens Advisory Panel was set up under, by Vermont state law. And so we have an explanation of what that entails. The panel is set to act in an advisory capacity regarding the matters of decommissioning. And in that, they will be advising the Governor of Vermont, the General Assembly, a number of state agencies, as well as the public regarding these issues. Next slide, please. And what do those matters include? Well, first of all, it certainly means act as a conduit for public information and really to educate both the panel and the public on what decommissioning means and what is going on as far as shutting down the plant and decommissioning it. The panel is to encourage community involvement and is also, will be receiving written reports and presentations by experts, by state agencies, also things set up through Commissioner Recchia. I imagine I'll be talking a lot to the panel members, and you'll get to know me and I'll get to know all of you. Moving on, next slide. The reports received, these will include, among other things, there are a number of site assessments that are being worked on, and when the Entergy representatives speak later this evening, they will discuss further what those entail. There's also a report that is required by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission called a Post-Shutdown Decommissioning Assessment Report, or PSDAR, and I know they will briefly speak about that as well. There will also be a number of periodic reports on the Decommissioning Trust Fund. There is also an additional state-established site restoration fund, and there may be some other funds coming up as well. That will be a question of where can the money to remediate the site all be found. We're not going to be discussing the decommissioning funding this evening. We just don't have time, and admittedly, the information is still being developed. Next slide, please. And so, with all this, the duties, the NDCAP will provide a public forum for comments regarding Vermont Yankee decommissioning, both on plans, both on reports, and on what is said in these meetings. It will provide comments on these plans to various state agencies as well as the Vermont Yankee owners, and also really to the legislature and to the governor as well. Paramount on this is there is an annual written report that is provided to the governor and the energy committees of the General Assembly. While those are compiled by what is said here and what is done at these meetings, I know that one of the things I'll be doing is actually putting that onto paper. So the first one is due January 15th of 2015. So next slide, please. And as I've already said, yes, January 15th is the first report. This would include comments received regarding decommissioning and anything that the panel considers appropriate regarding the plans and the discussions that have been carried on. One interesting item, the panel shall assess whether further changes to the panel's memberships or duties are appropriate. And this is something that is required by the statute to go into the report. So as the panel works and learns how to work with each other, if you realize that there's a resource or that there's someone that you need on this panel, to please, well, get that to me and it will go into the report. And there is, with that, there will be, absolute recommendations on such changes provided to the governor and the legislature. Next slide, please. By law, the panel is required to meet 4 times a year. Since we're starting in September, I know the commissioner is hoping that we can get a monthly meeting in October, November, and December, and we'll see how that goes. Annually, there is an election of a chair or a co-chair and a vice chair for the panel, and that will take place later this evening. The panel shall act by majority vote of its entire membership. So that goes to what is approved, and there's some conditions on how a panel meeting can be called. It can be called by the chair or a co-chair or by any 5 of the panelists. And once that is done, whomever calls the meeting is required to give the rest of the panelists adequate notice of the meeting. And that also means getting notice out to the public and, well, giving me a little bit of time to find a room. Moving on. So the resources that the panel has at its disposal, there are a number of state agencies named in the statute. Leading this charge is the Public Service Department through Commissioner Recchia and his staff. That includes me. And we have a number of legal experts, financial experts, and other engineering experts available in the department. And the commissioner also has the capability of bringing in experts for additional consultation. So, all in all, the commissioner is required to inform the panel on the status of new decommissioning matters, any new information, notify it in a timely manner, notify of status of ongoing decommissioning processes, and upon request, panel members can be provided with whatever information that the Public Service Department has at its disposal at that time, basically a request for public record. Moving on. And just in closing with my presentation, just a few notes. The panel has a total of 19 members. This represents 15 stakeholders within Vermont Yankee's decommissioning. We have the owners, we have workers at the plant, we have a number of state agencies represented, we have elected officials from Massachusetts and New Hampshire as well on this panel. So we have what we think right now is a good collection of the stakeholders regarding decommissioning. But really that's up to the panel to decide whether that's the correct mix. Do things need to be added? There are other decommissioning panels out there for other decommissioning projects that are ongoing in the United States. There have been some completed decommissioning projects, for example, Maine Yankee, Connecticut Yankee. These are potential resources at the disposal of this decommissioning panel. What is unique about this panel, as best as I can tell, is this is the only panel that has been established by state law. Many of the other panels, as best I can tell, were initially thought to be a good idea of the plant owners. And so they kind of cropped up with whatever community involvement was available as a means to make it easier for the company to get information out, and then also as a way so that a public forum such as this could be established. So that's all I have. Thank you very much, and let's move on.
Great, thank you, Tony. Are there any questions from the panel members on this issue or why you're here? Okay, so I'm going to briefly describe some of the aspects of the settlement agreement that were reached, and then we'll open it up for public questions on these topics so far. But I do want to just say that I'm not going to cover everything in the settlement agreement, nor am I going to try to present you with the full legal context of that settlement agreement, but I think most people understand that Entergy and the state of Vermont reached agreement on December 23rd of last year that laid out a process for the closure and what we would consider to be a transition to a non-nuclear future for Vermont. And a couple of those components involved aspects that will come before this panel, and I want to really focus on those. One is a settlement. The settlement agreement lays out a schedule for the site assessment work that was being done, and that is to be done by the end of the year, as is the PSDAR, the post-shutdown decommissioning assessment report. So those are probably the two key pieces that are coming up before us, and one of the reasons, as Tony mentioned, that I would recommend that the panel meet monthly for the next few months is that those documents are going to be coming in. We will make those available to people. We will have a website where those are available, but we will also need to discuss them as a panel. So that is why I'm thinking the next 4 months it's going to be pretty rigorous in terms of meeting. And then another component of the settlement agreement besides those two reports is that over time that there's a good faith effort to work on site restoration standards and to implement those after the radiological decommissioning of the site. And I know Commissioner Mears is here and Dr. Irwin from the Health Department. We're working closely with Entergy to figure out how best to start that process, and also, you know, I will say that Entergy has been very cooperative in the last several months of working with us on giving us a heads up on the site assessment and being able to talk about those aspects of what's going on with the site assessment so that when we get it, we're not surprised by it, or that we make sure that it includes as much as we had hoped that it would include. There will be issues that we can't reach agreement on, and the settlement agreement identified a number of those that were going to be left for future discussion, and so I would make you all aware that we will continue and do continue and want to continue cooperative discussions with Entergy on a variety of issues, but you know, there may be cases where we are not able to be in agreement, and that will come before you, and you will understand that, and you will be fully informed of that if and when it occurs. I'm delighted to say that as of the moment, none of that has occurred. Entergy was responsible for doing a variety of things in the context of the settlement agreement, most of which were financial in the context of dates that were part of the settlement agreement. They have reached and met every obligation that they represented they would meet. State of Vermont is continuing to work on these issues, and in particular, I think, we wanted to see the site assessment and the PSDAR, I think, before we in earnest start on site restoration standards and negotiating those, but we will do that. I don't want to cover all the other issues associated with the settlement agreement, in the sense that a lot of them involve dismissal and resolution of other cases, payment of other funds, agreements to do certain things. But I do want to point out that Entergy did meet its commitment to start the site restoration fund and fund that with $10 million to start that process. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions of the panel members on this, or anything that anyone wants to add regarding the settlement agreement, or for that matter, your charge as we go forward.
I just have a suggestion, and this may be premature, but even though it's not the charge of the panel to talk about the Windham County Economic Development Program or the Clean Energy Development Fund, the Windham County element, might it be possible to get regular reports from ACCD once those programs start rolling out MPSD on the CEDF? Just a suggestion.
Sure. Yeah, I think we can certainly provide that information. I know that could subsume the full, if we were to focus on those issues, which are not our charge, that would subsume all our time. But I hear your point. Just a report, we can certainly do that. Any other comments or questions? Yes.
I think you'll be able to hear me. Yep. There's going to be a lot of information circulated. You mentioned, I believe, in your opening remarks, something about a website. Yes. Will that provide the documents that we're going to describe today and into the future, so that we have access to it? Secondly, quite honestly, one of the things about this new technology is that organizations are passing the costs on to individuals in terms of printing materials that are really only useful in printed form. Will we have access to printed materials if we request them?
So we will establish a website where all documentation of this panel will be there. The minutes will be there, the agendas will be there, documents that people will be reviewing will be there. In terms of printed form, my department is prepared, to support the panel in whatever form you feel like you need. If you need things printed out, we can do that and deliver them. I understand your point of certainly the banks have figured that out. We are happy to provide you with whatever form you need.
I'm just thinking, this is a citizens panel. Right. Those would be the members potentially most effective.
Yep, that's fair.
And let me add to Representative Dean's point.
Yeah. Speak a little louder.
This is Mike Toomey with Entergy. We are also going to establish a website that the documents that we submit to the state, many of them, if not all, I'm not sure what level of detail we can get physically onto the website, but we're going to post a significant majority of those materials on the website. There is another alternative means for people to get the information. So for example, when we submit the site assessment study, we will also post that on a website. I'm not sure exactly what the date of the rollout is, but it will be there for people to look at.
You're all going to provide us addresses and stuff like that?
Yes.
So that's a good lead into the comment that I had, and that is, I think that there could be some benefit to describing what the site assessment ought to be, because we met a couple of times now to go through some elements of the site assessment, and as you stated, it has been very forthcoming with Entergy. But I think that the settlement agreement doesn't describe fully what the expectations are, and without those expectations beforehand, we're not certain what we'll get in the end.
Any other panel members have any questions or comments? Okay, so right now I would like to open it up. Does anyone in the public have any questions regarding either the settlement agreement or the role of the ENDCAP? At this stage, we're not doing general comments on decommissioning in general. I'd ask you to just keep it to these particular areas, but let's work on that. Yes, go ahead. Please come up here, state your name. If you would, please come up to the podium if you're able. State your name so that we have it for the record, and then happy to try and answer your questions or address your comments. I'm sorry, sir. Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Leo Schiff from Brattleboro. I'm part of the Safe and Green organization. And my question for Commissioner Recchia is it within the scope of this panel to advise the governor, the legislature, and the public related to any matters that concern safety in any way? And if not, what would be your plan on how to avoid that?
Right, okay, well, that's a fair question. Obviously, there's a lot that is in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission purview and is preempted from the state participating in it. That said, the panel is free to discuss any aspects of this that they wish to, but the recommendations and the ability to influence what is going on will obviously have to be sorted out as to what is in the state interest and what is in the federal interest. I will say that my department is fully engaged with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to provide comment on any aspect of the decommissioning process that is within their purview. So this still provides a good forum for identifying those issues and addressing those questions. How it gets addressed, whether it gets advised to the governor, the legislature, or the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, is really a function of what the issue is.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the public? Yes, sir. And I should say, as you come up, we may not be able to answer all the questions. That was a lucky one. We may not be able to answer all the questions that you have tonight, but we will record them and we'll try and get answers for those that we are not able to answer this evening.
I'm Frances Crowe from Northampton. When do you expect to have the spent fuel rods put in dry casts? And where do you plan to bury the dry casts? Not on the floodplain.
Okay, thank you very much. Entergy is going to be presenting us with some updated information on where they are on the spent fuel management later on in the agenda. So I will defer that answer till we hear what is happening there. Thank you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mike Mulligan from Hinsdale, New Hampshire.
Yep, you're welcome to lift that microphone up, even though the shorter of us, if I were there, that would be the perfect height, but it's not. So, and the other one actually will be. Yeah, thank you, Mike.
I'm Mike Mulligan from Hinsdale, New Hampshire. I was a I was a Vermont Yankee employee until I got fired. And essentially, when I was working at Vermont Yankee, there was what was in the documents and what was known. I used to force Vermont Yankee to write documents that was well known throughout the plant. And it got them in a lot of trouble. So the question is, how are you going to have like a reporter at the plant or a certain person who is interested in getting through all the getting away from all the bureaucracy and saying this is what's going on at the plant, or and that kind of thing. How are you going to get the independent information that's accurate, the real information besides what's in the documents or what people want to report for their own interest. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so, and thank you. I mean, I have right now my nuclear engineer on site at the plant most of the time. The NRC has a on-site inspector as well, and resident nuclear engineer. But we'll be feeding certainly from our standpoint, from the state standpoint, we'll be feeding that information back through the panel, and obviously the panel, if they feel like they're not getting information that they need, they'll see items that they want to address and they'll ask questions about it, and we'll go out and try and gather that information. But we are on site at the moment, and we will be through the closure and through the defueling of the reactor as well.
Do you have any special privilege of transparency? In other words, you have a right to see
Yes, we do. I won't go into all the details of it, but I'll tell you we can see everything that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is allowed to see. Okay. Thank you. All right, at this point, what I want to do is also tell you that before this panel was formed, the Public Service Department commissioned a study and a survey by a consulting group, CBI, to address what was in people's interests. What were they concerned about? What did they want to know about? How did they visualize the settlement agreement? What were they still concerned about? What did they want to know? And I am very pleased to present that we have Catherine Morris from CBI here to kind of give a summary of the survey information that she developed with her company. Now, the other thing I want to mention is that Catherine is one of the resources that we have available to the panel for further investigation or additional information if that's needed, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But Catherine, welcome. Thanks so much.
Now, which one works? This one?
That's the one that...
All right. Can you hear me? Thank you. That one does work too, I guess. Not used to so many microphones. Let me just start by telling you a little bit about the Consensus Building Institute. We are a nonprofit that is based in Boston, and we did this work in collaboration with the Social and Environmental Research Institute in Amherst. And what we were really engaged in doing is what is often the first step that CBI does in preparing for a mediation on conflict, or for preparing even for a series of town halls over a set of issues that are of interest to the public. We go in and talk to a broad number of stakeholders and find out, as Commissioner Recchia said, what are the issues that are of most importance to them, and which one of those issues are ripe for consensus building, which ones are the most contentious and need more effort in terms of building that type of agreement, and which ones are possibly, just going to stay out there as unresolvable in terms of trying to get everybody to agree on the resolution. But what CBI does is we support the collaborative problem solving in that broad range of settings. And so what I'm going to share with you today is kind of the highlights of that report, which sounds like the website isn't up yet. It may not be up, but the report is public. I've shared the draft report with everybody that I interviewed. I was able to have the opportunity to talk to a number of you that are in the room tonight back in the spring in the preparation for this. So you had a chance to review that report. We had comments on it. We tried to address all of those comments and then finalize the report this summer. And I'm happy if it's not available on the website yet to provide it to anybody, and I have my contact information at the end. So we're going to move to the first slide. So what is a stakeholder situation assessment? I've sort of explained that, but I did want you to see in particular who we spoke to. One of the things that is important about this type of assessment is that it's I use the term confidential, but I would maybe clarify that and say it's a not for attribution interview. In other words, when we spoke with people, we told them that we were going to use what we heard from them. We were going to reflect that back in our synthesis of our report, but we were not attributing anything, so that people felt like they could be as honest and frank as possible with us. We tried to get a number of people from really key interest groups. We talked to many of the VSNAP members, the state agencies. We also talked to local and regional government agencies, officials, and a number of, as you can see, a number of environmental organizations and Entergy and Entergy employees. So hopefully this does reflect a pretty strong and diverse set of perspectives. The issues that I'm going to highlight are not necessarily issues where there was agreement, but they're issues that were raised most consistently by the people that we spoke with. And then I'll talk to you a little bit about where we think you might be able to go with some of those. So these are the questions we ask individuals. What's of concern to you, and what role would you like to play or your organization would like to play as decommissioning moves forward and decisions are being made? What do you think the role of the Citizen Advisory Panel should be? It just so happened that the legislation had just passed as we were coming in to do these interviews, or it might have been that we would have recommended such a Citizen Advisory Panel. So we had the opportunity to ask everybody that we spoke to, what do you think the Citizen Advisory Panel should be doing? What issues should they be looking at? And what should their role be in terms of keeping the public informed? And most importantly, we ask a question that I think is pretty key to having a successful stakeholder process, which is where would you want to turn to for information? Clearly, Entergy is going to have the bulk of the information that is needed to make these kinds of decisions and assess the choices. They're also going to have information that's coming from the state. NRC is going to have information. So we ask people, where are the sources of information that you trust and you would turn to in making decisions around this? Okay. So I'm going to hit on all of these in a little bit more detail, but just to give you a preview, the timing of decommissioning, when it starts, and I mean beyond the safe store, when that you actually begin dismantling the plant, what level of cleanup will be attained at the end of the day, what's going to happen to the spent fuel per your question, both the fuel that's in the pools as well as the casks that are on site, and we'll have additional casks that will be placed there. And what are the implications for the emergency planning zone around that? What's the status and uses of the decommissioning fund? I think, well, we'll talk about that. I know that's not going to be addressed in much detail tonight, but clearly that's going to be a big factor in determining timing. And the redevelopment of the site and what those economic impacts might be. So the last one I want to emphasize is trying to improve trust and transparency. I think there has been a long history in this community with Vermont Yankee, and there is definitely some scar tissue to go around to everybody. And I think one of the things that I heard was the hope that this process would really be the opportunity to create that kind of collaborative and trusting process where people felt like there was transparency all the way around. Okay. So let me just talk first about the issue of timing. One of the things that we heard was the general consensus that people would like to see this move as quickly as possible and as quickly as is safe. And they understood, I think generally there is a pretty broad understanding that the funding has to be there for this to move forward, for the plant to move from safe store into actual dismantling of the plant. And so that raised the question in many people's minds about, well, how is that fund going to be managed? What is it going to be used for beyond, during the safe store period and leading up to it? And how is that going to impact the timing? And there was, I think, a pretty broad recognition that there's some real trade-offs in how the timing is going to affect a number of other things. Certainly the environmental risks. people understood and wanted to know more about the trade-offs between how long you waited and the radiological changes that happened over that time frame, and what that would mean for safety, for the safety of the workers during the actual dismantling of the plant. The longer you wait, presumably the less risk there will be. They also wanted to know how the timing was going to affect the overall costs. And I'm not sure, I would expect that it would be far more complicated than just a straight line. The longer it is, the more it costs, because there may be some changes in the way that, how quickly you can dismantle the plant. What that means in terms of opportunities or opportunities lost for reusing the site, depending on how long it takes and when it starts. And then, obviously, linked to that, the economic impacts. So next. How clean is clean enough was something that we heard from many of the people that we spoke to. And that was not limited to the radiological risks at the site. In fact, there are potentially some other hazardous contaminations that need to be considered, and people want to make sure that both of those are widely known and understood. And I think the factor that people realize is that clean is going to be certainly a function of how the land is going to be reused. So an industrial use may not require as much of a cleanup as a commercial use, for instance. And so some choices have to be made about that along the way. And that will be linked, obviously, to how much land there is. Another question that came up for many people, because it was very unclear to them how much land would be available after the rest of the plant was removed, and there was obviously still the cast would still be sitting on the site. I think today we're going to hear a little bit about the site assessment and the PSDR, which is going to provide a lot of information about this for everybody. And I think I think the site assessment I commend Entergy for sort of taking getting a head start on the PSDR so that people have that information and have a better understanding of what's there and what needs to be dealt with. The other thing that I think that this panel has to be thinking about along the way, because it was an issue raised by many, was when will you need, and the public need, to have independent verification of some of the information that's being shared. When Entergy provides their PSDR, are there going to be aspects of that are controversial or in question that need to have independent verification? There's been sort of a model for that here, where the state has been doing monitoring of the operations and presented independent data to verify. I think that's going to be, when we get to the trust issues, one of the aspects that will help build that trust over time, and I believe that there's an anticipation in the settlement agreement for that type of expertise to be brought into the process. Questions were raised here today and were in our interviews about the disposition of the fuel. Again, pretty strong consensus. Let's get it moved from the pool to the cask as soon as possible. And then there were concerns raised about the current pad and where it sits and whether or not that is adequately secure for the long term, because people realize it's going to be there potentially for the long term. Just a side note, I have been working on the issue that the reason it's sitting there for long term, which is the fact that the federal government has not really done its job in terms of finding the final geological repository for this stuff. And I think one of the things that has been promoted at the national level, and I'm working on independently, is the question of whether or not a pilot for moving the fuel from plants that are shut down to a consolidated storage where it can be more securely looked at, and then that frees the land up more quickly. It also provides lower costs for the plant owners all around the country that have shut down plants. So with a little hope that maybe not sitting there for hundreds of years anyway. So the concern over the current pad as well as the location of the new pad for the additional fuel that's going to have to be put into cask was raised. As I mentioned, I think there have been a lot of contentious issues, and that has resulted in a lot of loss of trust. But I heard directly from a number of you that there has been certainly an improvement in the feeling of trust as well as the level of transparency over the past several years, and that has really taken a turn. So hopefully this process will again cement that and help strengthen that trust between, and here I'm not speaking just of Entergy and the community, I'm speaking about between the stakeholders. Clearly there's not agreement about all these issues, and there has been some very strongly held opinions that have caused breakdown in relationships even within the community among stakeholders. One of the things that I think NRC probably has a long road to hoe here in order to regain some of the confidence that they've lost over time as well. And I can't say that I dug into all the stories about NRC, but I did hear a pretty widespread concern about NRC being the only source of information for some of the things that you need in the final arbiter of some of the decisions. It was one of the things that you mentioned, I think, is that the state does have authority in the settlement agreement to set some of the standards for the cleanup, and I think that's a key that allows another level of authority to consider what are the appropriate environmental standards for cleanup. But it also, I think, leaves open a little bit how clean is clean. It doesn't really answer that question, so it's going to be something that's left up to this advisory panel and to grapple with. Okay. So I'm not going to, certainly not going to lecture the people here about what are the benefits of public engagement. You wouldn't be here otherwise. But I think it is worth noting that there is, a broad range of what public engagement looks like, and one level of that is just gathering public input. That tends to be, or can feel like, a one-way conversation. And it's my sense that this advisory panel was created with the intent to having two-way dialogue with the public, but even more so than that, to really have the responsibility to gather the information and from the public about what their concerns are, and have that integrated into the actual decision-making process in terms of their advisory role. And hopefully that will not leave anybody leaving these meetings feeling like they were the ones that are having their needs met by being pushed over the cliff. Little exaggeration, perhaps. Okay. So I'm not going to go over this. This is your roles and responsibilities. I would just ask, what else is a question that this panel has got to address? I think what is outlined in the legislation and the settlement agreement is, or in the legislation is certainly the minimum required of the panel, but you're going to need to grapple with the question of what is within your scope, what are your priorities, what issues you need to take on over the course of potentially a number of decades. So, and the final, I think finally, is this the last one? The other thing that I would urge you to give some time and thought to is what your governance looks like, what your rules of engagement are going to be. There are some minimum aspects of that outlined in the legislation that you can make decisions on majority rule. I would certainly urge you to think about whether or not you in fact want to try to drive as many of the decisions that you're making together towards consensus. What kind of expertise and information you're going to need along the way, and how can you best engage the public beyond these types of settings? What are some pathways for you to be able to really understand what the public wants and needs? Okay. So there's one more maybe? No. Okay. One of the things that we have recommended in this report, and you can certainly read more about it, is that this panel can take lessons learned from the VSNAP and hopefully adopt some new practices, one of which would be that rather than just debate and leave it on the table as a debated item, to actually deliberate. I think this is going to be a much more time-consuming approach to some of the issues, but deliberate to the point where people at least have an understanding of the different perspectives and are at a place where they can start trying to find some mutual gains in moving ahead. And that's part of consensus seeking. I think the other aspect of that is the issue of transparency and openness. Having all the information available is one step in that direction, but I think people need to understand not just what the information is, but how it was used. They need to understand when they have provided input, how that was used, or how it was determined to either not be relevant or could not be addressed. So I think people are looking for transparency plus in this case, and that's a key ingredient to rebuilding the trust that I talked about earlier. I think that pretty much covers it. Happy to take some questions, and that's my contact information if people need to follow up.
Thanks so much, Catherine. We do have the report actually in full on the website. So the difference is that right now we're using the public service website. So right now it's at publicservice.vermont.gov. It's just below my welcome to the page discussion. The report is right there. We will be establishing a separate ENDCAP website or SharePoint site or something that people can access directly without having to read my welcome to the Public Service Department message. So we'll get there. But right now it is online and it's available. So do the panel members have any questions for Catherine about the survey that was done or what the point was? Yes, Jim.
Jim Matthew again from Westminster. Not really a question, just a comment. I appreciate the report. I think it's really well done, and I take to heart the recommendation that especially those of us who were on VSNAP not repeat that history. This is a fresh start. And my point is that when people do get a chance to look at the report, I think one of the most frequently used words in the report is transparency. I don't know if it's on every page, but it's darn close. Than it should be. And I feel very strongly that the burden of proof is on us. The word transparency in this report isn't going to do it for us. We have to be transparent from the get-go, and I think the public is probably justifiably skeptical. So hopefully we won't do that. And I think a key to that is several people have mentioned the need for more than one meeting. I mean, the statute calls for 4 meetings a year. Well, that wouldn't work. We need probably 4 this year. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. And yes, we are. Just to be clear, it's a minimum of 4 meetings, but we can have as many meetings as you all want to have. And I so much appreciate the volunteer commitment of the citizens here. But we'll do whatever is necessary to provide information in a timely way and be responsive. So I'm looking forward to that. So. Any other questions for Catherine from the panel? Okay. Oh, David.
Well, I'll follow Jim's lead and make a comment rather than a question, but I had a few things I wanted to say that I think fit into this category of the discussion as we're launching this new entity, that whatever we are. And I'll build on what Jim said. Just based on my own experience, I worked on a set of nuclear waste issues out in Washington State for a number of years. And one of the things I learned about that experience was that people have such strongly held views about issues around nuclear waste and radioactivity. And because of the level of mistrust of both the companies like Entergy that are involved in the business and of government, the presumption is going to be that any decisions we make, regardless of the basis of them, are suspect unless there is some transparency and the opportunity for the public to input, scrub, and evaluate. So I feel very strongly in support of Jim's suggestion and the recommendation in Catherine's report around transparency, and figuring out what that means and how to make that true will be the real trick. I wanted to throw out just a suggestion for us to think about it. Maybe it's something, we don't have to decide some of these issues obviously tonight, but just to put in the panel members' minds a few thoughts. One is whether or not we ought to consider, as Commissioner Recchia noted, that we may have the opportunity to involve CBI in some of our meetings going forward. And as we get launched, I think it might be useful to consider bringing in their expertise in terms of the facilitative and mediation kinds of experience they have in complex environmental and scientific issues, to think whether we may want to, at least as we get launched, ask them to help us with setting up agendas and figuring out how to run the meetings in a way that is constructive. The other thing I wanted to throw out is, Tony did a nice job of describing the legislation and giving us a chance to understand it. One of the things, and I won't speak for the representatives here who actually voted on the legislation, but I know that speaking, I think, for Commissioner Recchia and I, we encouraged and recommended that approach to this legislation, that is to include language that said we can change the scope and makeup of the panel, because we felt strongly we wanted to have this in statute. And the way the legislature works, we didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of input. At the point we realized we wanted to do this, it was towards the end of the session. So we made a recommendation about the makeup of the panel, the size, the representation. But we, again, in the spirit of transparency, did not want to make that the final word. This, at the end of the day, is supposed to be a process that involves allowing the community to advise the decision makers on this. And so I think it's important that we really reflect on and make sure that we're comfortable with this approach, and that we invite the public at large to give us input. And then the last thing I'll just note, and Catherine, I assume this is probably some of the resources that you all looked at, but I know that there are other resources about how other citizen advisory panels around the country at other sites have been formed and their makeup. And I wonder if that wouldn't be something that, if others felt it was a useful piece of information for us to have at an upcoming meeting. I know for my own part, I looked with some great interest at the Maine Yankee Citizens Advisory Panel. At the conclusion of their work, they did a fairly thoughtful and introspective report on that experience and what worked and what didn't work and lessons learned. And it may be something that as we launch, we can use to build upon.
In fact, I actually was talking to Wayne Norton, the CEO of the Yankee companies, who was involved in the Maine Yankee from start to finish. And one of his observations was that he would do it again. There are a few things that he would change. And I think the Maine Yankee example is probably the most robust of the citizen advisory panels of all the Yankee companies. I think in the report that was done independently by EPRI of that process, the company was quoted also as saying that they feel like it saved them money and time over the course of the decommissioning because they didn't have to litigate as many issues. There was much more community buy-in to the decisions at the end of the day. So yeah, I think there are some really good lessons learned. And let me just say, I guess in finishing, that I can imagine 10, 15, 20 years from now that this advisory panel and public engagement process could become the one that people are turning to as the example for doing it right. There's 3 plants that are now have recently announced that they're going to be decommissioning. This is the first, I believe, citizen advisory panel that has been convened around a merchant nuclear plant. And that's going to have its own challenges, I think separate challenges that haven't been faced by some of the other plants. So I think there is the opportunity, if done right, this could be the model that others look to.
Okay, thank you, Catherine, very much. Thanks so much for the report. And again, it is on the website. And as Catherine and David pointed out, Commissioner Mears, we do need to. One of the tasks of this panel is to figure out, are we constituted correctly? Is their charge correct? And to report back to our legislature in January, so on that piece of it. So we will have some governance issues and membership and structure issues to talk about in the next couple of meetings. So let me just ask if the public has any questions or comments on the survey that was done or the issues that were raised as a result of that survey in terms of the priorities that we should be looking at. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick comment, really.
Would you mind stating your name? And you're pretty loud, which is great, so you might not need to move, but if otherwise, you're welcome to come use the microphone.
Susan Lance from Northampton. And a quick comment echoing, I don't know your name, but my question was if CBI was going to continue with this Citizens Advisory Group, and in my way of thinking, I think perhaps it could really ease the facilitation, the transparency, and probably the time that it takes. So I think it would be interesting to look into.
Well, thank you very much. We certainly have that as an option. I have, as the Department of Public Service, we funded and sponsored this initially, and CBI has gotten some additional funding, grant funding available. But I do want to make it available. I want to make CBI available as a resource to the panel, and we will talk about how best to use them throughout this process. So. Yes.
I'm not known for not being loud enough. So.
Beth Fox, Assistant City Manager, City of Keene, New Hampshire. I wanted to commend, I think, the folks over in Vermont for being progressive and recognizing at the outset that this issue crosses our state borders, that communities in both Massachusetts and New Hampshire are impacted. And adding representatives to this group was a great first step. What I'm curious about moving forward is how we can continue to keep and how this panel can continue to keep people outside of Vermont who may not have the direct connections informed and engaged and have opportunities for input into the decommissioning process. We are as impacted in many ways as the people of Vermont. We are geographically as close as many Vermonters, and have over the years shared the responsibilities of emergency planning and ensuring public safety.
Thank you very much. I won't try and answer that in whole right now, but to say that I think that, in short, we will establish a website, SharePoint site, or some such mechanism, and be very clear about having all documents and agendas and things like that, and meeting schedules available on that. While we're on that note, I apologize to the New Hampshire folks for the conflict that occurred with this meeting. That won't happen again, but I thank you very much for coming here, Senator. We do.
I just want to say one thing along those lines. As I mentioned earlier, Wyndham Regional Commission, Southwest Regional Commission, and Franklin Regional Council of Governments, we're working closely together because it's our populations that are going to be most greatly impacted. One of the things we need to figure out is how to better communicate to our populations. Now that this group has stood up, hopefully we'll have good communication coming down so we can get information out at the local level and coordinate more tri-state cooperation. To me, one of the real silver linings of this whole situation is I know among our organizations we're working more closely together than we ever have. And we really are a larger community of interest because we have a lot more in common among this area of these three states than we have in differences. So we need to make the most of that. And so we'll work really hard to get word out to the local community.
Thanks, Chris. Yes.
That's right. Using the FERC model in terms of identifying stakeholders or parties that are interested, that simply get all the notices that this panel get, would be one way to address the concern that has just been spoken to. And in the era of electronic communication, that is not terribly time or dollar consumptive. And yes, but I would do it directly as opposed to filtering it through other organizations. Just get it out, have a sign-up period, and anybody who's interested just signs on. Yep. And they get what we get.
Okay. Very good. All right, at this point, what I would like to do is move on to get some substance as to where we are in this whole process. Entergy is here to talk about a variety of things, including the construction of the second ISTC pad for the spent fuel storage, the PSDR status, the site acceptance status, EPZ issues. And so I welcome Mike Toomey. Thanks so much for being willing to do this.
Well, thank you for giving us the opportunity. And I probably should open up by making it clear that we are a very willing participant in this process. When the commissioner approached us last year in the legislative session about this nuclear decommissioning citizens advisory panel, we were very happy to sign up and participate and put members on the panel that represented the company along with the others, because we do think that it's important to have an ongoing dialogue with all of the stakeholders about the issues that are facing both the company and the community. So we're not being hailed in front of this body. We're a member and happy to be part of it. Very briefly, introductions. Chris Wamser, who is seated because there's not enough room at the podium for two people. He is the site vice president at Vermont Yankee. He's the man who's actually got the team that is running the plant. Chris has been working at Vermont Yankee for 25 years, worked up through the operational organization. He was the plant manager for 3 years, and he's been the site vice president since 2011. Chris and I are going to tag team on this presentation as we walk through it. I am Entergy's representative as well. As I mentioned earlier, my office is in White Plains, but I've been very involved in all of the issues here in Vermont since 2010. I was part of the team that negotiated the settlement agreement, was part of the team that presented our case to the Public Service Board, both when we were requesting a certificate of public good to operate for 20 years, and then subsequently when we were pursuing a certificate of public good only through the end of this year. So although I'm in New York, I'm very tuned into what's going on up in Vermont. Let's go to the next slide. Current operational status. Since the announcement last year, we've said this out loud, we said it at the press conference, we've said it a number of times since then. Our focus is on safe, reliable operation of that plant through the end of this year. There are a lot of issues going on. We have teams of people who are focused on decommissioning planning, but Chris and the core team at Vermont Yankee is focused on running that plant safely, securely, and they have run it continuously since the announcement, and in fact, VY has safely generated electricity for 538 days since the last refueling outage, and we are hopeful to maintain that stretch all the way through the end of the year. The plant has begun coasting down. The plant will not be operating by the end of the year. As we get closer to the end of the year, the fuel burn requires the plant to slowly coast down. It's not like a light switch where you run till the end of the year and turn it off. It coasts down. Right now we're at about 97% capacity factor, and that's going to come down slowly over time over the next couple of months. The safety record for operation and the personnel in the plant has been very good in 2014, and all of the NRC performance indicators remain green and in the category of a top performing plant. Since 2013, I won't spend much time on this, Commissioner Recchia explained this, we did have a number of things that we agreed to do as a result of the settlement agreement. We've met all of the commitments that we said we would meet. We had a settlement agreement that required us to fund a site restoration fund, to release some funds through the Clean Energy Development Fund, and make certain economic development money available. We sought a certificate of public good, and that was issued in March that allows us to operate through the end of the year. And we've had open, transparent, and continuous dialogue with various stakeholders. And that's happening at a number of levels. We've got working level team meetings with Dr. Irwin and Commissioner Mears, with people at the site to give them a lot of background information before we provide the site assessment study. Bill Mole, who is the president of Entergy Wholesale Commodities and my boss, he and I have met with the governor a couple of times just to check in, make sure that he understands what the status of the plant is, how we're making progress, and so the dialogue has been good. Next slide. Our historical timeline is impossible to read from this distance. It just shows, we're going to have this available on the website, right, this presentation. But it shows the shutdown decision, which was in August of 2013, notification of cessation of operations, which we provided to the NRC. We had to formally advise them that we wouldn't be running the plant. We did that shortly after the announcement. We've got a team in place to start decommissioning planning. We are moving forward on all those steps through the end of the year. Chris, if you want to add anything in particular on the historical timeline, I'll defer to you for a moment.
Thanks, Mike. I mean, overall, really what this lays out is that after the announcement of the shutdown decision of Vermont Yankee, we had to do some benchmarking. We got in touch with other industry plants that had previously decommissioned or were currently in the process of doing that. There is a lot that needs to change in terms of how the regulator does business with us because really the whole world changes when you take a facility, you shut it down. The risks of the facility don't go away completely, but they certainly change and are certainly minimized compared to a fully operational facility. The NRC requires on the order of a year typically to review and approve any particular thing. So overall, this lines out really the different submittals that we've made to the NRC since the shutdown announcement.
So as I jumped ahead a little bit ago, we did have a number of commitments under the settlement agreement that had to be done in 2014. The first was to fund the first $10 million of the site restoration fund, which is the fund that is set aside to clean up the site after we finish decommissioning the site to the NRC standards. We then have to have site restoration work done. That fund will eventually have $25 million in it. The site restoration fund settlement provision required us to put in an initial $10 million in cash, which we did on May 6th. We also released a little more than $5 million to the Clean Energy Development Fund, and we provided the first of 5 payments to economic development activities. That was $2 million this year and $2 million each of the next 4 years. We made that payment. We also committed to file a certificate of public good application with the Public Service Board by June 30th. We made that filing either on the 29th or the 30th, but we met the deadline. And that case is pending in front of the Public Service Board. Essentially, what that case requires is we've got an existing concrete pad on which the dry cask canisters holding spent fuel are located. We need a second pad because of the volume of the spent fuel that we'll be putting out there. In order to build the second pad, we need a certificate of public good from the Public Service Board. So we've asked them to issue that. That case is moving on a little slower than we had hoped, mainly because we had to do some additional technical evaluation of the moisture content in the soil, but we are expecting that case to proceed along a schedule that allows us to move the spent fuel according to our expectations, which I'll get to in a minute. And we've also committed to work with the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources on thermal discharge issues. That really wasn't a specific deadline. It was an ongoing obligation. We've met that obligation. Our draft permit is pending in front of the agency. I don't know when they'll issue a final permit, but we've certainly done everything we were required to do to participate in that process. We've had an unwavering commitment to our employees. We hold regular meetings, forums, websites, etc. We've made an enormous effort to place employees at other facilities that we own across the fleet if we can. That continues to be a significant effort. Our existing staffing levels will remain basically the same through the beginning of 2015. and then at key milestones, they'll reduce, and I think we have a slide on that when I'll get to it. And we're working with the states of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts on labor placement issues. Our charitable donations in 2014, I won't spend much time here, but consistent with prior years, we've donated about $175,000 this year. Those donations will be reduced over time. Once we stop operating, we stop generating revenue. We are not going to have the ability to fund all of the organizations that we've supported in the past, but we will focus on local community support. Next slide. This is the staffing transition slide. Chris, you want to talk about that one?
Sure, thanks, Mike. As Mike mentioned, currently the plant we're continuing to operate and focus on day-to-day operational safety. So essentially the station is fully staffed as we would normally expect that to occur. All the normal operational protocols, maintenance protocols, engineering protocols are being followed. And in parallel with that, and shown in the little purple arrow there, is we are also doing decommissioning planning. So we have taken a team, we've established a separate team to plan the decommissioning in parallel with day-to-day operations. We brought in, augmented some additional resources and additional leadership. We have actually a separate vice president that is overseeing that decommissioning planning. And that is to ensure that that effort does not distract day-to-day ops. So as Mike had mentioned, we expect to operate throughout the rest of this year and shut down at the end of December. After we shut down in December, we're going to go into a period of about a 3-week period where we're going to go through the process of disassembling the reactor vessel and removing all the nuclear fuel from the reactor vessel and moving it into a spent fuel pool, and essentially isolating the reactor from the spent fuel pool after that. That'll put us in this middle bin there called the wet fuel hot management. Once we are in that mode, we will not need the staffing that we need for an operational plant, and we have plans in place to reduce our staffing, and that goes back to comments Mike made about our ongoing efforts to transfer employees to other operational facilities and otherwise find landing places for everybody. During that period of time, we'll be doing things like draining systems and otherwise removing hazards that are present in the plant. There'll be a significant portion of the power plant that really has no useful purpose. Once we get into this mode, we will drain fluids from those. We will remove hazards such as lubricating oils, energy sources, batteries, and things like that to reduce the overall hazard footprint of the system and ready it for dormancy. Showing in about mid-2016, or roughly the April or May timeframe, we will be in a position where the risk posed by the fuel and spent fuel pool is reduced, and we will go into what we call a wet fuel cool opportunity. Our staff needed to maintain that is reduced again. You can see the number of approximately 127 personnel on site at that time. And really the focus in that period of time is going to be completing the construction of the second dry fuel storage pad that Mike mentioned, and really the ongoing efforts to remove the fuel from that pool and get it onto the casks. And then after anomaly in the 2020 timeframe, you can see that we call it dry fuel management, and this is very much akin to what some of the other sites in the region that have decommissioned, are currently looking like Yankee Row with fuel on a pad. The difference being that our buildings will be in what we call a dormancy or a safe store mode, where they are, the phrase we're using is cool and dim. We will reduce the energy needed to keep them heated, and otherwise we'll put them in a storage mode.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And I think there was a question earlier about when do we expect to get the spent fuel out of the spent fuel pool and into dry cask storage. I believe that was your question. Our current expectation is that we will have that done by the end of 2020. And we certainly, when we announced the closure of the plant, we announced at that time that our expectation was to get it done by 2021. So we're a little ahead of our earlier expectations. I believe that 2020 will remain our expectation for some time, unless we have some unexpected developments. So the site assessment study, that's one of the things that we agreed to provide in the settlement agreement. It's really not a document that, to our knowledge, has been created at other facilities. As a product of the settlement discussions we had with the Department of Public Service, we agreed to, by December 31st of this year, provide an assessment of the facility, which essentially is an effort to identify where do we think there's radiological issues that have to be dealt with through the decommissioning process, where are there non-radiological issues. There could be chemicals, transformer oil. Over the years, the plant's been operating for 40 years, and what does the assessment look like? What is it that we think we need to do to complete the decommissioning process? So that study is a first step toward identifying that, and we've met a couple of times with Dr. Irwin's staff and Commissioner Mears' staff to explain to them what the scope of the study is. The hope there was to explain along the way what it was we were going to provide, so that on the day we provide it, it wasn't a surprise and it didn't have a different set of scope and content than the state was expecting. Right now, I believe we will have the site assessment study completed probably in the next 30 days, so well ahead of our deadline of December 31st. That will be, I guess, by the end of October, probably. Next step. We've also submitted a number of filings to the NRC. Chris, why don't you explain in brief what those submittals were?
Thanks, Mike. Some of the things, and some of these were referenced on the previous slide that showed us a timeline, but we have technical specifications, which is really the rule book that the NRC issued us when they also issued us our operating license. There's a lot of detail into what that set of regulations require. One of those things is that there's very detailed description of what our actual organizational structure looks like, what level of management oversight is required to be on site, and what programs that we need to adhere to maintain our license. The needs for that change dramatically after we defuel. As an example, one of the programs that we maintain is an inspection protocol for the reactor vessel. So it doesn't take too much thinking to think after you take all the fuel out of the reactor vessel, there's really not a lot of benefit to do that level of detailed inspections going forward. So that's an example of a program change that we're going to get. Similarly, the secondary containment requirements is really requirements on our reactor building itself. That set of requirements is reduced significantly after we take all the fuel out of the reactor vessel. On the order of about 40 or so days after we shut down, technically the need for the secondary containment is no longer necessary. And really what that does is it's a mechanism to protect the operators in the control room in the case of an accident. So the potential for an accident is significantly reduced, therefore the need for this is also reduced. So those are a couple examples. Under the emergency planning, we have made a submittal for the post-shutdown emergency plan. Again, when a person objectively compares an operating nuclear reactor at full power at about 1,000 pounds per square inch, and the accidents that we are analyzed for and have to protect against, and then you look at a time in the not too distant future when you have taken all the fuel out of that reactor, put it in a pool, the scope and nature of the things that can occur from an accident standpoint are reduced tremendously. So consequently, the needs for emergency plan actions are not the same and they're significantly reduced. So as a result of that, we've made some submittals to change that scope to really do our business going forward.
Yeah, and it's worth noting at this point that a lot of the steps that we're taking now to change the operational characteristic of that plant is to reduce the costs associated with that plant. And that's an important issue because the Decommissioning Trust Fund, once we stop operating, is the source of the funds to pay for the whatever work we're doing at the plant. So the sooner we minimize the cost profile of the plant, the better the Decommissioning Trust Fund situation is, because we don't want to spend more money than we have to. And we recognize we have an obligation to be good stewards of that Decommissioning Trust Fund. Next slide. Oh, okay. The upcoming plan milestones: we will cease operations by the end of 2014. We will defuel the reactor and had that done by January of 2015. System abandonment and decommissioning modifications in 2015, and we hope to install the second ISFSI pad sometime between 2016 and 2017. Right now, even with the delay at the Public Service Board, which is again because of technical information that we're submitting, we think we will not jeopardize our current expectation of completing the transfer to dry cask storage by 2020. Next slide. This is just a graphical description of the next steps. Again, it's a little difficult to read from this distance, but the bottom line is that's a way to show that chart, identifying the information that was on the previous page, and I think once people have the opportunity to download the information, they can look at it in more detail. Next slide. Okay, so the second ISFSI pad, this is obviously an aerial view of the site, and in the middle of the site you see the rectangle that's sort of at a cockeyed angle. That's the main building that I'm going to draw your attention to. To the right of that main building is the current pad. Let's go to the next slide because it zooms in on that location. And you can see that if we were still looking at the main building, it would be straight ahead and above the picture line. You can see the casks. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I can see right there inside that fence. Large cylindrical canisters that contain the spent nuclear fuel in dry cask storage. That existing pad will be eventually filled up, and there'll be another pad either adjacent to that or perhaps nearby. That's one of the issues that we're providing some additional information to the Public Service Board about, because we've got to be careful with the moisture content of the soil in that area to be sure that the pad will be in the condition that it needs to be in. Next slide. Current spent fuel storage, the majority of it is in the spent fuel pool. 13 casks are safely loaded. We've got an application pending, and a total, when we're done, of 58 dry cask storage canisters will be outside on the pad, and they will be there until the United States Department of Energy fulfills its obligations under its longstanding contracts to come and pick up that fuel, unless there's some interim arrangement that happens before then. We put together a very brief animation that we thought would be helpful to give people an overview of the decommissioning process, and we're going to run it right now. Sure. Joe gets to the right button. You need to clean up your desktop.
Joe, can we see the other files?
No pressure.
Here we go.
Okay. Spent a lot of time on this. Let's make sure we have the audio. You should be set to go. Let's start it again. We had no, well, you know what? It looks like the audio is on mute, Joe, on the computer. And then start it again. Yeah, that low right-hand corner. You got to click on the, see the little X all the way down the bottom.
16-year-old now?
We will continue. After shutdown, all nuclear fuel in the reactor will be transferred to the spent fuel pool for a Decommissioning is a complex and multi-step process that begins when a nuclear plant is retired from service and is tailored for each plant's situation. It occurs over many years and has several key steps. As the facility and systems are secured for long-term storage, carefully decontaminated and dismantled, and the land restored for future use. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, in conjunction with state and local authorities, oversees each phase of the decommissioning process. The first step in decommissioning Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Station is for the plant to permanently shut down and stop generating electricity. Shutdown is planned for December of 2014. Security, maintenance, and other essential operations will continue. After shutdown, all nuclear fuel in the reactor will be transferred to the spent fuel pool for initial cooling, and then after an appropriate cooling period, moved to dry cask storage on site. It's expected that all of Vermont Yankee's fuel will be transferred into casks by 2021. The dry cask storage system is comprised of sealed steel inner containers that fully enclose the spent fuel. The cask steel and concrete outer shell provide strength and radiation shielding, thus completing the system. Each loaded cask weighs almost 200 tons. When a cask is fully loaded, the heat generated is very small, typically less heat than that given off by a home heating system, and the residual heat dissipates by natural air circulation within the cask without the need for fans or pumps. The sealed casks also provide near complete containment of radiation. Vermont Yankee will house dry casks on 2 secure storage pads on site. While dry casks are being loaded and moved to their storage pads, a security barrier will be erected around the facility. The next phase is an extended period of minimal activity at the plant, as the remaining fuel and irradiated equipment are prepared for storage and eventual decontamination. The duration of this phase for Vermont Yankee is undetermined at this time. During the entire process, independent experts from the NRC will ensure that the implementation of SafeStore is progressing as planned. Federal law mandates that the spent fuel will be taken away for disposal by the U.S. Department of Energy. Once the NRC has confirmed that the necessary financial resources are available to safely complete decommissioning, the major components will be dismantled and disposed of, including the dry fuel storage pads and security structures. The site will be decontaminated to standards established by the NRC. The final phase will be to restore the site to standards determined by the state of Vermont. When the Vermont Yankee site has been restored, it will then be ready for future use. Nuclear plant decommissioning has been tested and refined over many decades. So far, more than 30 U.S. reactors have safely completed decommissioning or are in the process. Entergy is committed to a transparent and open decommissioning process with many opportunities for public participation. In addition to public meetings, the Vermont legislature has established the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel as a forum for public engagement and education on Vermont Yankee decommissioning issues. For more information about Vermont Yankee's decommissioning, the public process, and what you can expect, visit us online at safecleanreliable.com.
Now, Joe, I think we're just about done with the presentation. But you may want to...
Decommissioning is a complex and multi-step process that begins when a nuclear plant is
that you can't hear enough about. Let's go back to the presentation. I think we're down to the last couple of slides. So we're focusing on a safe transition to dry fuel. And Chris has already explained what we're going to do in that process, so I think that slide's already been covered. For the next. And that's it. So that was the end. That animation will be also posted on our website along with the other information. Our objective through this process is to put as much information as we can reasonably put on the websites for the public to have the access to the information that they are interested in receiving. So Chris, unless you have any concluding remarks, I think that does it for our presentation. Pretty close to on time.
Yes, you are, and in fact, you caught us up by 5 minutes, so I thank you very much. So we appreciate that, and there'll be lots of opportunity. This is really an introduction. We'll have lots of opportunity to talk about and ask questions about the various stages of this. Couple of clarifications I just wanted to make. One is that, and I didn't say this up front when I was summarizing the settlement agreement, but the commitment, Entergy's commitment is that within 120 days of the site, not the Site Restoration Fund, different, but the Decommissioning Trust Fund, reaching the adequate amount of money to do this work. Entergy is committed to request that from NRC and to start and commence and finish that work. So that's an important part, and that's different than what the NRC rules allow, which is the 50 years of safe store if necessary. The other thing to know is, even though the site restoration, in the presentation it was described, and I understand why this would be the case, that they will restore the site to NRC standards. We are committed to working with the Department of Health and the Agency of Natural Resources and Entergy to establish what we think the Vermont appropriate site restoration standards are ultimately, and to get those in place and work through that process. But this is a good start. Thank you very much. It's a good introduction to what the timeline is and what we're hoping to achieve. In the next several meetings, we will have a good discussion over the site assessment that's provided, as well as the PSDAR, which will really get us into the timing and other work that needs to be done. Any questions from the panel on this particular issue? Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Chris. Couple things. I have more questions than we probably want to discuss tonight. So just a couple comments. One is, I think the transparency as we go through this process, I'm going to agree with everyone, especially hearing this presentation and looking at that video. It's going to be very important as each process that is transparent. I am going to assume that we are not getting into all these questions tonight, but that we will, so that we can save our questions, because I know that I have quite a few, but is it my understanding that we're saving those? And
correct. I think for tonight, because we had such a full agenda for just introduction of everything, that that this is really a high-level introductory exposure to where things are, and next meeting we will be able to start really delving into it. So thank you, Senator Kelly.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the panel? Yes, Representative Mark.
That was a great video, but can we have an opportunity as either a panel or individuals to actually come and see for ourselves on site? That would be really helpful to me. I don't know.
Are you saying a site tour now or sometime later?
Before the winter, I think would be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah, that's a good idea. Any other questions or comments from the panels?
Sorry, Chris, but we keep talking about the NRC and what their responsibility is. Do you think it would be a good idea to have a representative from the NRC on this panel, or to be here as a guest to be able to answer some of those questions and talk with them as well?
I think as a guest probably makes sense, or to invite them as appropriate for issues that we want their help with. I think that makes a lot of sense. So we can certainly do that if we choose to do so. Yep. Anyone else at the moment? Okay, then I want, yep.
So Chris, Chris or Mike, would you be open for the panel members who haven't seen the play yet to be to organize a tour for the panel?
I'm sorry, you're just looking to clarify that we were committed to do that, but we will invite you? Is that what your question is?
Well, instead of just so is that something that Tony can work with you guys on, or is organizing a tour for people who haven't been on a tour?
Tony probably to work with Joe Lynch, and we can coordinate it depending on how big, if it's everybody in one fell swoop, we might want to break it up in 2 groups or something, but we can make that happen.
Well, I think like the president and vice president, we shouldn't all be in the same place at the same time. That's how important we are. But we can break it up, Chris. Sorry. Okay, so just we are on schedule, amazingly enough, but let me open it up to any questions from the general public on what you heard or saw. Really high level, though, because we are not going to get into specific issues tonight. But yes, ma'am. Please do come up, give your name, and feel free to ask questions or provide comments.
So my name is Priscilla Lynch, and my comment is not very high level. But I did notice that on the screen, the contributions from Entergy, if I added correctly before it moved on, were plus or minus around 100,000. And my understanding from what you said, if I heard you correctly, that there would be at some point you wouldn't be able to afford to do that any longer. And it just strikes me as rather ridiculous that a corporation that describes itself as having a fleet of plants would not be able to continue that small level of contributions to a community that's going to be storing that dirty, dangerous fuel until the U.S. Department of Energy fulfills its obligation. And we know the U.S. Department of Energy is the people and the citizens. So until we take over the cost, you can't afford to continue your contributions?
Well, I didn't say that. What I said is that the amount of the contributions will be less to reflect the fact that the plant is no longer operating and generating any revenue. We have a fleet of plants. We participate in the communities for each of those plants at a particular level. We do intend to continue to be a member of this community. I think the purpose of raising that issue today is we've actually raised it with some of our community partners as well to let them plan for the future. Just as our employees are moving into a different era, some of them are moving to other facilities, some of them are not going to be employed, and they've got to reset their lifestyle as a result of this plant closing. So does the community, but on the other hand, we do intend to continue at some level. We just haven't determined yet what that level will be.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am, go ahead. And anyone else who wants to actually provide comments is welcome to kind of line up behind them. We can save a few minutes that way, but and not to put pressure on the current speaker. Try not to breathe down.
Try not to be pressured. Hi, I'm Paki Wieland, and I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, downstream. And I love the idea of transparency. What a great theory. So let's see if we can put it into practice. And what I'd like to ask about is the question of the dry cask storage. That the spent fuel rods, according to that wonderful piece you did and what you've said, after 5 years, the fuel rods are cooled down enough so that they could be put into dry cask storage. And I don't think they have been. And I think you have a lot of spent fuel rods, so many at the plant that it's frightening to me. And I wonder, since they could have been put in there yesterday, what the delay is in dry cask storage now.
Well, I'll try to address that a couple of ways, and Chris can jump in. First of all, you shouldn't be frightened about the spent nuclear fuel. It's safely stored in spent fuel pools. One of the attributes of the cooler fuel is that it helps protect the warmer fuel. So the fuel that goes into the pool most recently, it helps to have older fuel in a, can't remember what the pattern's called, a checkerboard pattern, so you don't put all the hot fuel together, you intersperse cool fuel next to it, and it's got physical properties that are beneficial. So from an operational standpoint, which I'll let Chris jump in on, there are benefits to leaving the older fuel with the newer fuel. Eventually, by 2020, all of that fuel should be in dry cask storage, but I'll let Chris explain in any more detail if we need to, but we are very confident that the existing fuel storage is very safe.
I don't have a whole lot to add except to say that the casks themselves are actually licensed by the NRC, right? So that it's a device that's designed, there are certain design assumptions. One of the design assumptions is the energy level of the fuel that you're putting in there. So just at a fundamental level, it is not okay to take a piece of nuclear fuel out of an operating nuclear reactor and put it in a dry cask. It would not be sufficient at that time. So that is why there's a delay that is necessary in a pool before we move to dry cask.
So even though there seemed to be an overload of spent fuel rods, that this checkerboard you're talking about is, so it's useful to not put them in rather than to not put them in because to have this dry cask would be much more expensive.
Well, no, he didn't say it would be more expensive, but a couple of points there. And this is a common misconception, and sometimes it's helpful to have these kinds of conversations.
Certainly.
There certainly is not an overload in the spent fuel pool. There is more spent fuel pool there, there's more spent fuel in the pool than we originally expected, because the expectation was the DOE would come and pick up that fuel on some regular schedule. But it's not an overload. That spent fuel pool, you should come and take a tour of the site and look over the railing and see for yourself. We've got plenty of room in the spent fuel pool. We've got plenty of safety margin on storing that spent fuel pool, that spent fuel in the pool. What Chris was saying was that once you move to dry cask storage, you've got to wait until all the fuel is completely cool to meet the specifications of the NRC. And your point is that there's fuel that's probably been in the spent fuel pool for 10 years. Why hasn't it moved? And the answer is it's very safe where it is, number one. Number two, it helps provide safety margin for the newer spent fuel. And we don't need to incur the cost of going to dry cask storage until we are ready, at this point, until we're ready to start transitioning into a decommissioning plan.
But you are allowing that part of the rationale is the cost. That there are more spent fuel rods than you had anticipated, but that it's not, you don't see it as hazardous. The reason some of the fuel rods have not already been put in dry cask storage is because it costs more.
Well, it's a complicated issue because we're, as you know, the Department of Energy has the responsibility for picking up the spent fuel. We are in almost constant litigation with the Department of Energy. We filed suit against them for failing to fulfill their obligations. We've gotten a recovery. We filed suit again earlier this year. And so it's not simply a cost issue. There are a number of factors that affect it. There's a cost to keep fuel in the spent fuel pool. There's a cost to put it on the dry cask. You're going to incur the same costs overall by the time you're done, more or less. And we don't want to structure our operational process in a way that would jeopardize any of our recoveries from the Department of Energy. We also want to focus on providing a safe environment, and if it's equally safe to be in the spent fuel pool or on dry cask storage, then from our perspective, there's not an issue there. It will eventually be in dry cask storage, and on this schedule, we should expect to have it there by the end of 2020.
So one of the things I guess I would add, just to help out here, not to try and interpret, but I think we recognize that there is an efficiency of doing this in chunks, right, in terms of moving it. And we know that when the new fuel comes out of the reactor, it needs to be there for at least 5 years. So Entergy has proposed to do this in kind of campaigns that are in large chunks, fill up the existing pad, construct the new pad, fill up that pad, and do it in a couple of seasons that do still finish by the time that last fuel would have been eligible to come out. And so in that respect, the state of Vermont feels like they are meeting our commitment of, and what has been represented to us as doing this as expeditiously as possible, as opposed to, I mean, yes, we can revisit whether over the course of the last 20 years fuel should have been continuously moved out, but that's not where we are at the moment. So right now I feel like the structure that they are proposing is as aggressive as it can be to get the work completely done at the time the last bit of fuel was eligible to come out of the pool, and for that I appreciate their effort, so thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, oh yes, I'm sorry, there's a line, just like I asked there to be. Hi.
Hi, good evening. My name is Clay Turnbull, and I am with New England Coalition on Nuclear Pollution. For those of you that don't know us, we're often referred to as an anti-nuclear group, which I personally don't agree with. I think of ourselves as advocates for safety. We're looking forward to working with Entergy and the panel as we move into this period of decommissioning. And transparency has been mentioned a lot this evening. As we look forward to moving forward, I think a top priority is that the stakeholders come to an agreement of what the end state is going to be of this process. What will the end state be after this decommissioning? And without a consensus agreement about that, or some pretty clear vision, and I think memorialized on paper, that vision has to be the guide. Because without that vision, I see something like, well, in the report that CBI wrote, one of the statements says that there was uniform or everyone agreed on one thing, or there was one thing everyone agreed on, and it was that the site would be best cleaned up to industrial or commercial purposes. I think there's a lot of folks that might disagree with that statement and think that the site perhaps should be cleaned up to a standard cleaner than what industry would need it to be. So the Entergy representative told the panel that they have been telling ANR and one of the other state agencies what the report that they will be given later this year, maybe I think a month ahead of schedule, what that report will contain. And there's some of the transparency that's missing that from my perspective right now is that who has the input into what that report will present? It sounds like the public, I don't know. What are the criteria that report needs to fulfill? If you have a vision of what you want the site to be, then you know what you need to look into and investigate. So I guess my closing comment is really that we need to have an end vision of what's going to be there. So look forward to working with you. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Clay.
Mike Mulligan, Hinsdale, New Hampshire. A couple of questions would be, what are you going to do with all the fuel that has pinhole leaks? That's a current issue in the industry. Another one would be Vermont Yankee supplies all their in-house loads 95% of the time by the turbine, and it's going to be a big deal shifting over and having all the electricity supplied off-site. So that'd be another interesting thing. As far as transparency, I think the deal is, we've seen it in that video of Vermont Yankee that just showed us. It was a very good video. It was perfectly explained. And the future in front of us could be, Vermont Yankee could be decommissioned in the most transparent manner ever done. You could sit there and you could have an in-house area where all the officials discuss issues and show us what's going on or what they're going to do through a series of video recordings. You could see, I mean, the magic today is the internet and our interconnectivity and stuff like that. So you could put everything on the internet. You could sit there and have a bunch of reports and videos and explanations. You could have a set of blogs that would be manned by competent people, and the public would be asked to participate, maybe have special people or people that are a little bit more educated than the other people, be on those blogs and explaining what's going on and having the public participate and stuff like that. So that'd be the thing I'd be thinking about. How do you really get public participation? That would be in public engagement. That would be a series of internet, maybe one internet site with a couple of blogs. A specific issue. You'd identify in a blog, and so you would sit there and communicate, ask questions. The public would ask another set of questions. You'd answer, and it would be something. The idea is, well, let's do this. Have the most recorded decommissioning that the world has ever seen. You know, you got cell phone cameras, you got video recording, you could record all the meetings, you could make it searchable, so you know you do a search and a portion of the video explanation or the recorded explanation could be called up and stuff like that. It could be, I mean, you could really transform your image by how you handle this decommissioning at Vermont Yankee. You could sit there and say, we could be the model for the world. We could be the model for the United States for the next 50 years as far as we discuss everything, we get it up on the internet, we record it, it sits there for posterity, and you know, you could reclaim your image. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, very much. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. My name's Annika Corbett. I'm from Florence, Mass. And I guess I wanted to respond to the man before about the end thing. Now, where I know you're at the beginning, but obviously it would make a difference if you thought you were going to have, let's say, photovoltaics on that land, and you then would not take down your electrical arrangement that brings the energy from Vermont Yankee to the grid. So I'd like to hear about that, and I have one other question.
Yeah, just real quickly, the Vermont substation, if you saw the end of the video, that Vermont substation, the switchyard,
Was still there.
that will still be there
Okay.
when we're done. So I don't know what the future use of the
Yeah,
facility will be.
it's
but-
not owned by Entergy, so that's why they did not
Okay,
include
so
it
that
there.
just seemed like you wouldn't want to destroy that in case you might need it.
Right, you might need it, you might choose to else, for other reasons, but it's not part of the.
Right,
the
just to be clear, there is no plan to take down that switchyard.
Okay,
So
then
it's
the other
not,
thing is...
it's not coming down.
Okay. I noticed in your video the cooling towers were working. And it seems to me that you have a request, I'm not good at the details, to continue to use the river because that saves you money. And there is some concern on the steward of the Connecticut River's part regarding the fish and the temperature. I know you have been through this, but wouldn't it be a generous statement on your part to use your cooling towers? I know it costs you more money, but it would be a shame if at the end of all of this in 2020 or 21, if there were no more fish because of this last little bit of you using the water and making it too hot. We all know the temperatures are rising. Many of us went to New York about this, and I think maybe you would again get some kudos for doing the right thing.
Well, let me address that a couple of ways. First of all, obviously there's been a lot of discussion about that at the Public Service Board and in front of the Agency of Natural Resources. The Public Service Board concluded in the order that it issued in March that we were not having any negative effect on the river, and we agree with that. But having said that, I just want to clear up something. Once we stop operating in December, the volume of water that we will use is minuscule. It's not zero, but it doesn't call for cooling towers of any sort. We will not have any effect on the temperature of the river at all, measurable, once we shut down. So unless you're talking about what's going to happen in the next 6 weeks, I mean, it's been a very cool summer. We are in full compliance with our permit. We are not having any negative effect on the river. And that's a fact that's been litigated repeatedly. Not everybody has the same point of view on that, but the Public Service Board certainly ruled in our favor on that issue. So we are not going to change the way we operate the plant in the last 6 or 8 weeks of the year.
Thank you.
That's probably not a good statement to start our relationship around this table, but I will not use up the panel's time entering into a discussion with you. But it is not true that the board did not find any impact. They said this is a unique situation. You were asked to go to the Agency of Natural Resources. You have done so, and they are going through their process now. And I'm just sort of surprised to hear that statement, but you may gavel me in, Mr. Chairman.
No, I'm not going to do that because I think that I think this starts a constructive discussion, but I understand why Entergy said what they said, and I understand why you said what you said. It's a good start. It's fine. So, one more. Hello.
Hi,
Welcome.
I snuck in. Hi.
Yes.
Lori Cartwright from Brattleboro. I want to thank the owners of Vermont Yankee for deciding to close the plant at the end of this year. And I want to thank everyone on this panel for agreeing to a public process. I am concerned that there are 2 members who are absent tonight. I don't know of anything more pressing. I hope that they're well. I want to thank you, Vermont Yankee principals, for agreeing to move the fuel to dry cask storage, as Mr. Recchia stated, in as aggressive of a time frame as possible. Addressing the interviews that occurred that are giving you input, I found that 26 was an exceedingly low number, and I agree with my colleague Clay Turnbull that I believe we were promised that the site would be restored to greenfield, and that is a far different standard from industrial or commercial use. So I implore the panel to consider that in its deliberations. And I hope that one of the top issues of your discussion and your deliberations will be the acceptable radiation levels that will be emitted from this site after the operations at the plant cease. And I'm speaking on behalf of all of the residents of this community, all generations. And when I say this community, I mean the planet, because the radiation doesn't just stay where it has been emitted. I'm also concerned about the siting of the second pad. I hope that all considerations are given to keep it safe from accident or attack by land or sea by way of the Connecticut River or by air. I'm not an expert, but I do know that there are safety concerns that are hopefully being considered every step of the way. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Listen, one point I feel like I need to clarify is what the site restoration gets us to, because that has come up a couple of times. Let me clarify that our agreement requires that we work on site restoration standards necessary to support the use of the property without limitation. So I'm not sure where the industrial piece came in. Maybe it was just a presentation, but the NRC standards require the radiological restoration of the site so it can be used for any purpose. And our agreement requires that the site restoration, radiological and non-radiological, be restored so that we can use the property without limitation. So I just wanted to make that clear that that's the function, and maybe addressing part of Clay's thing, but we'll have a lot more discussion about that. Mike?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this evening and your comments. As far as end use goes on the site, I would think that the town of Vernon, the host town, has had the plant in its community for a number of years. We have a vested interest. Not only do I represent the town, I reside in that town, but we certainly have a vested interest in the end use of that site. I would highly recommend that this panel invite the folks from Vernon to join us in one of our meetings to discuss what our view is for the use of that land. Because I know the Town Planning Commission has thoughts on that. And the other thing that we also have to consider is this is a private piece of property. We can't just dictate how it's going to be utilized and what should be done with it. So there is a lot of negotiations that need to be done, but certainly that host community, my community, has to be considered in the end use, because whatever we do with that property, it's still in my town.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike or Chris, the 3 regional commissions have commissioned some economic impact analyses looking at the loss of income in the region and other economic effects. Do you know yet, and can you share to what extent it's going to be full-time employees versus contractors during the wet fuel, hot and cool phases, or do you know about when you might know?
Sorry, what was the number that you quoted? How many employees?
Well, do you know whether at some point, when you know, can you? I'm asking, do you know how many of those are going to be Entergy employees versus how many are going to be contractors? Because we're trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out what the exodus is likely to be, so that we can figure out what the income impact is going to be throughout the community, the other fiscal impacts. And of course, the dynamic's going to be different. So it's not trying to put you on the spot, but
yeah, what I can tell you right now is that the very first initial transition, operating, we're about 550, 560 people right now, and the first reduction takes us to about 316 people, I think is what that says. Those are all Entergy employees.
Any other questions from board members or comments at this point? Okay, so we are moving to our one order of business that we actually have to do this evening. So the statute put me in as chair for the first meeting, but recognizing that this is a citizens advisory panel, we have to do an election of chair or co-chairs and vice chair, and I have expressed a willingness to serve if people want me to, but I also express a very strong willingness to let someone else do this if they want to. So I guess, and the other thing I forgot to mention early on is we are going to use Robert's Rules of Order for voting and for management of the organization. So I am happy to accept nominations for any of the above.
I would like to nominate co-chairs, Jim Matto and Chris Recchio.
Do I could explain that at all? Oh, we have a nomination. Do we have a second, or do we have any other nominations? Right? Can we?
Is Lucy here?
Yeah, my wife and I were going to take our first vacation in 2 years, starting the day before yesterday. So in the interest of staying married, I would like to have something to say about the future schedule for that week.
Okay, so much for Robert's Rules of Order. David, do you want to say something?
In thinking about it, this is really a very difficult choice for a group like this to make, especially at our first meeting. And given with what I've heard this evening about what is going on now that we need to address quickly, I would be comfortable if you continue to chair. In the long term, this is a citizens advisory board, and I would like to strongly suggest that a citizen ought to be chairing, not a member of the administration. I love you guys and gals dearly, but I'm glad that you included Jim. I would include Chris, but none of us elected types probably ought to be chairing it. Kate, just a citizen really ought to be moving this forward. In the light of that, from my point of view, I would just like to suggest that we go with Chris for this initial period, and once we get past December, we've gotten a chance to know each other a little better, and some of the citizen members, that then we hold this election. So my motion would be, under Robert's rules, to table the motion for the election at this time.
Second.
Until January.
Second.
So I'm not clear what the motion is.
So the motion is to table the election and therefore impose upon me the continued obligation of doing this until January, and then revisit it, which
So
I think is
would it be more
perfectly
correct to just say there's a motion for Chris to be the chair until? the end of December, and then we, okay. I think we're looking for
You want an
agreement.
affirmative motion? I mean,
Right.
we should probably have an affirmative
Right.
motion ultimately, but. Can you speak up a little bit? Sorry, I got a microphone.
I'm sorry.
Someone.
I think that we do need an affirmative motion, and,
Thank you.
and just to follow up with you, Representative, I would just make a motion then for Chris to chair the meetings until the first of the year, and then we would bring this particular issue back for a new vote.
Okay, so we have a motion to. Second. Okay. Does anyone besides me want to say anything to the contrary? No. Any other comments or thoughts? Jim, take a microphone.
The main reason I support that is not self-preservation, it's part of it, but that really it's the institutional memory and the resources that reside in your office. And so I think that transition, with the understanding that there should be a transition, because the VSNAP had a statutory conflict of interest, in my opinion, where the statute required the chair to be advising himself, and that should go away, which I think is where you were going with it.
Yeah, I'm happy for that. And by the way, our resources, as meager as they might be, will be available to the panel no matter who is chair. So I just want to make that clear as well. But so we have a motion on the table to have, yes, Lucy, you want to say?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I just am wondering what happened to Chris's motion. Did you, or your... Oh, there wasn't a second. Okay, thank you.
So we have a motion on that is for me to continue through January, and we have a second to that. Is there other further discussion? Is now a good time for me to mention that it was just mentioned that Chris chair, and there are 3 Chris's on here, so that I'm gonna use my judgment to move it. Nice try, right? Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, then I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so we are zipping right along, and we took some public comment during this process. Yes? Oh, Vice Chair. Oh, Vice Chair. Right, thank you. So do we have a motion or a recommendation for Vice Chair?
Oh, wait. I would, this is going to sound like retribution, it's not. I think that Chris Campany, I nominate Chris as vice chair because, and there is a reason, that I think that having someone in that position who's in the position Chris is as chair of the Wyndham Regional Planning Commission helps to have a local say in the agenda that's clear to everybody, and everybody knows where he is. Deal with that.
We have a motion for Chris Campany, the vice chair. Do we have a second? We have a second, so let's open it for discussion.
Well, my thought is pretty much similar to what we just did with Commissioner Recchia, would be to hold the vice chair seat until we do the decision in January. As Representative Dean said, we get to know each other better, we understand what individual goals are and what objectives are, and get a clearer picture by January, because we would have 4 meetings, we'd understand what each person represents, what each person brings to the table, and I would ask that we just leave things as they are until January.
So I would assume that the position of a vice chair is to serve in the capacity of the chair should he or she not be present. And so I think it would be useful to have a vice chair, given for some reason Commissioner Recchia could not be present before that election in January.
My thoughts exactly.
If I could suggest that the terms be concurrent, so that the question of chair and vice chair is before the entire group in January, and that the terms be concurrent.
I'll offer that. Jim, I'll offer that as amendment.
Really, it's an amendment to Mike's suggestion, I would say.
Well, there was a motion, Jim, your motion to do this and a second. So if you're willing, if that's a friendly amendment to your motion, then I think we're okay. So concurrent session for that. Any other comments or thoughts? Yes, it was seconded. I think Jim seconded it. Okay, then taking a vote for Chris Campany to be vice chair through the same term, through January. We'll revisit both. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right, we actually did one order of business that we needed to do tonight. Thank you, and we have some more time. If there are any other comments from the public, general in nature, that people would like to bring up, please do. Thank you.
Lissa Weinman, Brattleboro. Thank you for convening this body. Look forward to keeping abreast of everything that happens. But I would say that I'm very concerned about the continuation of the emergency planning zone. I think Entergy's comments, I'm sorry, I don't remember your names, but the comments that it would eat into the decommissioning fund were we to continue the emergency planning zone. It's not really the spirit we should be thinking about it in. I think that while you say that the spent fuel pool is safe, there's a wide disagreement about that statement, and including Commissioner McFarland herself 10 years ago authoring a study about the imminent danger of spent fuel pools that have been overcrowded. Over the years, you don't like the term overcrowded, but in fact, spent fuel pools were never meant to be storage containers. They were meant to be moved every 5 years. Yes, it's true the federal government hasn't stood by what it was supposed to do, but that doesn't change the fact that those pools were not designed to hold as much as they do. There's also the issue of high burn-up fuel that I think I know you're not really required to disclose about how much high burn-up fuel's been used in the reactor. Therefore, we're in completely virgin territory in terms of the spent fuel pools, because we don't know how quickly spent high burn-up fuel corrodes the inside of those pools. So it's never been tested before. So we don't really know. Nobody knows, for that matter. So to minimize the potential threat of the spent fuel pool is to do us a disservice from the start, because there is a threat from the spent fuel pool, and the pools were not designed, and they are more subject than the reactor core to loss of power and also weather conditions, which, as we know, are coming at us more and more. So I would say that, you know, it's my view that this panel should look very closely at the emergency planning. Also because if you're going to wait for 5 years to start moving the spent fuel pool from the pool to the cask, that's the most dangerous time in many ways. So by then you've dismantled your EPZ completely. At the moment when you're doing one of the most dangerous tasks that there will be for a period of a year or 2 years, however long it takes, which would be a question, how long do you expect it would take to move all that spent fuel pool into the cask? So I think I am one citizen that's really looking very closely at the emergency planning issue. Vernon's disbanded its police department. Brattleboro bears the burden for that. We can't even get together to get a new police and fire station, but we're the ones who are going to be called first should something occur there. So I would urge you to pay particular attention to that matter, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do you want to
Just for a point of clarification, Vernon indeed has no longer a Vernon Police Department, but we have contracted with the Sheriff's Department, and we have actually more coverage than we had in the past. So any emergency that we may face as a community, I believe is presently being better addressed than it had been in the past.
So no speeding through Vernon still? Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other comments that people would like to make or questions that you'd like to put on our radar screen? Okay, well, I just want to thank all of you very much for coming and for participating. I want to thank the panel. I think this is going to be an exceptional panel. We'll get into a lot of detail and have good discussions. In the upcoming few days, I will send you some technical information about your participation and reimbursement and whatever like that. Also, I would very much appreciate feedback for how you feel like this orientation works. Does it facilitate discussion? Is it adequate? Any thoughts you have on the administrative aspects of this would be good. But the trick question that was on the thing was to ask you to bring your calendars in whatever form you bring them, because I do think with the site assessment coming at the end of next month, the PSDAR coming, the shutdown of the plant actually coming, that we do have a lot of work to do. Oh, and the fact that the legislature would like to hear whether we actually all get along and whether there's any change to the panel that we think we should make in January. I think we do need a monthly meeting between now and the end of the year. So I'll just ask the general question of the panelists, and we'll connect with other folks as to, is there a preferred day of the week? Is there a preferred schedule? Mike?
Well, I'm not going to offer a specific day of the week, but I'm going to raise the question about whether it would make sense to have the next meeting after we have made the site assessment study available so that we can talk about that at the meeting. Unless there's a desire to have another sort of a general overview meeting between now and then, I think we can get more specific about the date that we're going to have it available. Probably in the next week or so, we can get more specific about the date, and if it makes sense, if people think it would be helpful, we could have the meeting after we've provided the site assessment study. People would have opportunities to read it, and we could make a presentation to the public at the next meeting about what's in the site assessment study. I just offer that up as a suggestion.
Well, of course, I think there are things that we could still talk about even if that weren't available, but the governance aspects that we talked about today, or questions, just learning from the panel what your interests are and what you feel like you need to know. But that said, I think that if we did a meeting toward the about this time in October, would that cover it? And depending on when that report comes out and how detailed it is, if it's a day after, if our meeting is scheduled the day after, it won't make that much difference. But if it's a week or two and we can, review it thoroughly, then we can have a thorough discussion of it. We might need to, if it really does follow or come right before the next meeting, then I think, we'll also need to continue discussion probably into the next one. But I'm suggesting sometime around there, but I'm amenable to what people's schedules are.
I think the week of the 27th would be safer. I feel very good that we will be done by then. That
week of the 27th.
Halloween is at the end of that week, but the beginning of that week is the 27th. So. I've got somebody covering that for me.
Thursday, October 30th. That's the Thursday, the last Thursday of the month. How do people feel about that? Does that work? Okay. I'll continue to wear the scary costume that I'm wearing tonight. Okay. Yes, and then November, I know we should not make the fourth Thursday of the month. And my phone has completely died, which means I pretty much have all days available whenever you guys want. I'm looking over Mike's shoulder here. Yeah, let's look at November. Does anyone have a preferred time for that? So Thanksgiving is the 27th, right, of that week. So would the 20th work, the Thursday, the 20th? Okay. All right, and then let's go for 3 and see if we can do December. Now, yeah, the fourth Thursday of the month is the 25th. Everybody available on that day? How about the 18th? Is that okay? Good. So it kind of, for those of you who are following all this, it looks like we're going to meet Thursdays. That seems to get us through the end of the year. In October, November, December, and we will advertise those clearly. As I said, all this information, the presentation, the agendas, the minutes, I'm not sure, we won't post minutes until after this panel approves them, but we will continue to do that as we go along. But we are also recording, BCTV is recording this, they'll make it available. I know the other panelists, the question was, where are they? I know this was scheduled extremely quickly, shortly after the panel was formed, and I'm just grateful that as many people could show up as they did. And I know the other members are equally committed to this and are planning on watching the video, actually, so.
Awesome.
Yep.
Minutes thing? Yep. Because if there are any municipal officials in here that you may get this question.
Yeah.
So, does it apply to?
I don't believe it does, but I will investigate that. So the issue here is minutes are supposed to be pointed within, from a municipal meeting within, what is it, 5 days of the meeting. I don't believe we are, but I will check that. If we are, we will post draft minutes that obviously need to be adopted by you all before they become official.
Not being billed.
Yeah, that's right. The best thing to know, if you want to really know what we did, is to watch the video. That's great.
So I recognize that it's difficult, if not impossible, to please everybody with regard to the calendar, but I'm unavailable both October 30th and November 20th in different states. Well, I was trying to be polite until you crunched in on a second of my weeks, and then I said, oh, I better say something.
All right, so
I also thought that it might be useful to meet earlier in October, despite the fact that we won't see we may not see the site assessment, because there is a lot of work that can be discussed. But I don't know if it's absolutely necessary for us to schedule the October meeting relative to the site assessment. It could take some time to digest the site assessment as well.
Right. So, what is your availability?
Yeah, if we were to move those two a week earlier, it would, one, allow me to come. Two, it would give us a meeting before the site assessment to talk about broader issues. And then we would get the site assessment the week after.
I think that's understood that, whatever schedule you're on to get that done, you'll do that. Are the panel members amenable to? No. Okay.
I'm away
Jim?
22nd through the 28th, I'm not here. I'm away.
Okay, I knew this was going too smoothly the first time I tried. David?
One thing, and this is a large group for it to be possible, but maybe we could have call-in so that people could attend via phone because and after Dr. Irwin got finished, I was going to mention I'm long-standing commitment on November 20th. Not that I could not call in, but I am not flying back from Texas to attend this meeting.
We're gonna come out to Texas. We're gonna join you. No, it's easy. Okay, so it is clear to me we can't accommodate everyone on all these days. I appreciate the call idea. I think what we'll do is, although you may wish to reconsider the chair vote that you just made, I'm going to keep them where we were. October 30th, November 20th, December 18th will provide call-in opportunity, although I will also say that I hate that in a meeting like this. So, yeah, but I get it. I recognize we're all kind of working on a calendar constrained by the fact that we're now trying to get up to speed and people are already in fashion. in January.
If you have this kind of sound system, the telephone system will work much better.
Yeah.
So having the sound backup system for those that are on the phone, normally if the phone is in front of you, I can't hear them.
Right.
If I'm calling in. But with this kind of sound system, that problem should not be a problem.
Yeah. Okay, so what I would expect and normally try and do is, think about what would work for you as a kind of standard schedule, because I think that the more we can get further out and schedule them, the better off we'll be in terms of actually meeting this. But for now, I'm going to keep those that way, although we will establish an email list with everybody, with all the members on it, so that we can communicate about schedule and things like that. Recognize we will not be doing any business whatsoever over email, because these are public meetings and we're a public forum. We're not going to do that.
I would think that it would be easier to schedule out after we get through these first couple of meetings, because all of us have calendars and commitments that were already done before.
Right, exactly. So
I'm hoping that it'll be easier as we move to 2015.
I think you're right, and again, I just am amazed that actually we're getting as much confluence as we are, so I appreciate that.
I have a request. Well, I think everybody can hear me. As opposed to waiting for the website to originate and be up, can I request that we have all the PowerPoints from tonight sent to us as soon as possible? Sure. Because a lot of them are different than some of the written material we have.
Yep, sure, that would be fine. You got that, Tony? Yeah. Okay, excellent. We can do that. Although there is a website, it's just not the Citizens Advisory Panel website.
I assume those of us who had a presentation, can we just send it to Tony and have him distribute it out to the panel members?
Yeah, that would be great if you could do that. Any comments, thoughts, questions?
The only comment I'd like to offer is to say that I appreciate the existence of this panel and the fact that Entergy was allowed to participate. It may not seem like a big deal, but we cast a couple of votes here during the public discussions, and Entergy representatives were able to cast a vote in this discussion about Vermont Yankee, and I think that is a significant event, and I look forward to working with the panel. I know we won't always agree on issues, but I think that the fact that we're talking to one another in a respectful manner, and we have the opportunity to participate in this is a watershed. And at least on my own behalf, I'd like to say I thank the panel for allowing us to participate.
Thanks. Any other thoughts, comments?
I just wondered whether the settlement agreement would be something that the panel would like to look at as well.
Sure, I would expect it would be, and you should. I would ask you to look at it. It is also on our website. If that's easier to provide to you in a PDF form, I'm happy to do that. Okay. The website is public service, one word, even though it's two words, .vermont, spelled out, .gov.
Just a suggested agenda item, and Ross, I'm looking at you, so feel free to say, I don't want to do that. But since I know we're not deliberating on all things VY, but we're about to have a drill. Ross, I just wondered if you might, for the October meeting, just kind of give a recap of what we did during the upcoming drill.
This is Ross Nagy from the Vermont Department of Emergency Management and Homeland Security. Ross, and while we're doing introductions, I also want to introduce Aaron Kosicki, who's standing up in the corner there, who's also on the Public Service Department staff and is our attorney that we use on a regular basis. Ross.
Ross Nagy, I'm Deputy Director at Emergency Management and Homeland Security. We do have an exercise that we'll be doing concurrently with Vermont Yankee on the 8th of October. And this will kind of get some of the cobwebs out of things that we maybe haven't been doing over the last last few months. It will be the first kind of get everybody together, all the state agency participation, local participation as well, do the communication connectivity that we want to do as far as that goes. It will kind of start us in the kickoff for the preparation for the hostile action-based exercise, which occurs next May. And we also have an evaluated reception center exercise in December as well. So that's what's on the horizon right now.
Thanks, Ross. Okay, any other comments or questions from the panel? Thoughts? Jim, you scratching? Okay, great. All right. Again, I thank you all so much. I'll need a motion to adjourn, actually. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, I thank you all so very, very much for participation, both the panelists and the citizens. See you next month.